Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I want to make sure that I get your name correct because you did tell me Kate Glasheen. Is that
hmm
right? All
hmm
right.
Perfect.
Uh, Kate is joining us with a brand new book that is on the way in about 1 month from now on May 23rd, and that is called Constellations. I've had the pleasure of looking at it on NetGalley, loved it, and immediately thought, I need to get this person on the podcast to talk a little bit about this work and this book that's coming out and their creative journey and all of those pieces that come into play with the book. So thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, Jason. Super happy to be here. Again, thank you so much for reading the book, and just yeah, really happy to be here talking with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Um, so I always like to ask about creator origins. I'm a reading teacher. I also incorporate comics in the classroom. So I'm curious what connected you with reading, writing, and creating, sort of early on.
It's always been for me kind of a given, just because both my parents are avid readers. My mother is an artist herself. She's a ceramicist, but she's kind of she draws, she paints as well. So both those endeavors in any form they took were always encouraged and nourished growing up. So as time went on, I never lost interest in them and ended up pursuing drawing specifically after high school and got a BFA in fine arts. And I've always read comics, and I think just given the time I was in undergrad, I was starting in the year 2000, so
Mhm.
comics felt different then than they do now, for sure. So I kind of, I guess I leaned into the fine art aspect and was aiming for gallery shows and stuff like that. But I just ended up, like, it wasn't long after that before I started making comics again, and teamed up with someone I tangentially knew, Tom Pinchuk, at the time.
Mhm.
And we wrote in or we made he wrote, I drew Hybrid Bastards for Archaea. And this was, I believe, single issues came out 2006. And ever since I had gotten back into making comics with Tom, I've been at it since then. So yeah, and here we are now.
Cool, cool. And Archaea publishes some bombastic stuff.
hmm
It's a bracing. I mean, if there's a title through there, it's usually pretty bracing and
hmm
some strong work. So that leads us to kind of the present day of Constellations. What would you tell readers? What would be the pitch about Constellations? And I'll say again, a beautiful book. We'll talk a little bit about the process, the medium that you used, if that's okay. Um,
Absolutely, yeah.
and I know that it's set in the 80s, so near and dear to my heart in that way,
hmm
as a child of the 80s as well.
Oh
I
yeah.
started my undergrad in 2002. Um, so, so tell us a little bit about Constellations.
So I'll read a synopsis real quick, and then I can get into some more of the fine details surrounding it. It's 1986, and Claire has always felt more like a boy than the girl they were born as. But in the depressed upstate city of Troy, New York, that's always been a problem. So, as rated liquor cabinets and keg parties serve as rites of passage for some, Claire instead finds alcohol to be exactly the salve they need to medicate the gap between who they are and who they feel they are. A drunken bicycle crash lands Claire in court ordered rehab amongst a crew of fellow misfits also in dire need of help. It's there that they meet Charlie, the kind but seasoned caseworker who leads the teens in a different kind of classroom where lessons of math and English matter much less than those of survival. So as you said, Constellations is the story of Claire Dunrow as they grow up in the early mid 80s in a upstate New York city called Troy. And that's a real city. That's where I grew up. And I think that a lot of this book is kind of a shared story with Claire and I. Definitely hits real uncomfortably close to home because it's Claire's story, but it's our shared experiences. And I spent time in rehab myself for substance abuse. I'm trans, but I definitely struggle with that. And a lot of the reasons stem from growing up in a place like Troy in a time like the 80s.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's Claire's story, but and it takes place over the course of a couple years, but it's a lot of it is pulled from or inspired by stuff that I've gone through. Although it's kind of the curated, condensed version of it, seeing as how I'm pulling from my 40 years, whereas Claire is, it's a few years of their life that the book takes place over. Um, so that being said, the book is fully hand drawn using dip pens and India ink,
Mm.
fully painted with Winsor Newton watercolors, and I used Arches watercolor, cold press watercolor paper. So as when I finish any graphic novel, I just have like a 10,000 pound stack of paintings that are just gonna take up space in my apartment. But yeah, so it's I feel like I've done some digital work, but my heart will always belong to traditional mediums, and there's just a real connectivity with the work that I feel when
Mm.
I'm able to like viscerally put a pen or a brush to paper.
Uh, uh, I appreciate everything that you said there about sharing of yourself in the book and the bravery that it takes to go to places through storytelling, be it memoir or fiction, or whatever it happens to be. And I know sometimes that the lines blend a little bit. And I love the method that you're talking about there too. I think it really comes through on the page, the labor of love that I know this must have been, and just a powerful story that I think readers will absolutely enjoy and need and process. Thinking about substance abuse, thinking about some of those conversations of trans identity and the ways we find ourselves in the world. So I appreciate all of that about your
Awesome.
work.
I'm definitely glad that you got that from looking at the pages. And yeah, it's tough for sure. I feel like I'm a pretty private person with all things, of like of substance abuse, of the transness. Like these are not things that are comfortable at all for me to be so like out in the open with. But at the same time, like it's all intertwined with why these things were problems for me. And definitely making the book was a really, really crucial form of processing that happened.
Mhm.
Um, so it was like, it's kind of wild because it was like Claire's going through this journey, the same one that I am, even though like, I'm 1,000 years old. So obviously that's a little odd to be going through the same struggle as a teenager, but that's just how it is. And I think it's feels very strange to feel so I guess like having that like working through that arrested development and such, like needing that separation where there is this character that's going through this to kind of give me enough distance to work through some of those things. And then yeah, I mean on the other side of completion of the book, it's definitely been really pivotal for me. And I wouldn't say like I wouldn't say I'm where I need to be yet, but certainly further.
And I love art and storytelling for processing our stories, the things that we go through, the things that we think about. And peopling is just a whole process.
Mhm.
It is a whole process. And I think that artists and authors have a sort of a superpower in that, a key insight into that and ways of developing and thinking through experiences. So you mentioned you were 1,000 years old, and I think we're the same age based on our conversation so far.
You were a
So
thousand better than me. Congratulations.
my students would probably agree that I'm about 1,000 years old. So that totally works. Um, so what is it that you hope readers take away? What is it you want to share with readers, slash, what do you hope readers take away from looking through and reading through Constellations?
So, like, hands down, for sure, the biggest thing I hope is that if there's any readers out there who pick this book up and are maybe kind of on the edge themselves of anything, or veering close to an edge, I really hope this is has the potential to give them any kind of solace or support. And then the character Charlie, the therapist, there's a lot of pretty full sessions that he has with the kids, both in group settings and with Claire's one-on-one therapy, that I chose to put the meat of that in there. And I felt that it was important to the narrative to help kind of show this clinical setting that is kind of this weird hybrid of kids being kids, but also like medical therapeutic healing is taking place. But I wanted to include those in detail so the book could kind of have that second function as its own support group for a kid that might need it. So that's the biggest thing. And then I guess, the other hope I have is it feels pretty far fetched, but I have it nonetheless. I think speaking as someone who was in rehab, I went once as a 13-year-old and once as an adult as a 31. And, I feel like I am relatively qualified to say that addicts can be real easy to hate. They have this blast radius of damages surrounding them from every bad decision that they made, continue to make, and all the decisions that end up getting them to a place that they end up at. But addicts were every one of them was a kid once, and they just weren't getting what they needed to become whole and complete and adjusted adults. And that's Claire, and that's Pete, and it's Tanya, and it's Erica, and they're all survivors of the things that start a kid off exactly wrong in life. Um, so Constellations is kind of a behind the scenes of addiction. You get in at the ground floor of this where it starts. And by seeing in, you see that for a lot of addicts, like, yes, terrible decisions are on their way, but that very first bad decision was never really theirs to make. And separately, I feel like, if someone really believes that I'm just playing dress up, then it's probably easy to hate me too. And I think with Constellations, gender is at the center of the story, but it takes place in a time before this modern conversation about gender. And I think because of that, and in my childhood, it was this way as well. It kind of, there is no language to address it. There is no nuance to this discussion. So it kind of, Claire with their gender issues and these other kids with their issues as well, there's kind of this clumsy earnestness about it, or at least that's what I hope I portrayed. And I wonder and hope if that's enough to kind of sidestep some of that knee jerk reactionary explosion of the zeitgeist. So,
Yeah.
maybe create an opening for empathy that wasn't there before. But pipe dream or delusion, you be the judge.
Hopeful vision
Yeah, there you go.
is where I'll go, and a reminder that regardless of if you share an experience with someone, if you can step into it, understand it or not through your own experience, the language of hate is it should never be a place to go. It should never
Mhm.
be a place to go. And also a reminder for anybody that's listening through books like this that you're not alone in the things that you're going through and experiencing. Um, and there is life on the other side, and sometimes a very creative and a very full life too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Powerful messages. Yeah.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
absolutely. So I think I mentioned my next question was going to be about the process and the work, but I think that we've talked a little bit about that. And I mentioned that I love the way that you depict emotion. Um, so that idea of how did you develop this style of what you bring to the page?
It's really funny because I just like have gotten to the point where I just don't think my eyes work the same way because like I won't even realize like I'm drawing in like this, I guess sometimes when I think I'm drawing my most normal, it still like looks bonkers. So it's kind of funny in that way. But I think we had talked about layouts as well briefly, and maybe I could kind of segue to that a little bit.
Yes, please do.
Um, so I think, as most artists, do, it kind of started just by seeing, just being a little kid and finding some like a little left of the dial artists and such as like Bill Sienkiewicz, and I really loved Kent Williams comics when I was a kid. Like it blew my mind that someone was painting comic books. Like that was
Mm.
brand new to me, and loved Simon Beasley's stuff.
Yeah, so
So
unique, so very unique.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So I was lucky enough to be exposed to books like that as a little kid, and then I would even have some like super lucky junk store finds where I'm gonna mess up the creator's name. Nobu, I think. It's a book called 2001 Nights, and like it was some manga that was super hard to get at the time. Like in the 80s, like finding manga was not an easy feat, you know.
Hmm, hmm.
So something like that. And DC had this old imprint called Piranha Press. I remember at a junk store finding The Drowned Girl and The Sinners and what was the other one? And Hardcore. Those were all like really mind blowing books for me. And so I think like I loved a lot of other books too. Like, like I loved X-Men comics when I was a kid. So it wasn't like, I wasn't snobby about anything, but it was just like there was that seed planted where it's like, why are those books so much more powerful to me than like the X-Men books, which I love and they're super entertaining, but like something about them isn't hitting me in the way that these books are hitting me. So I think like that had to have been the seed for kind of the direction my comic work is taken. Um, and then I think, we had spoken about going into fine arts for my further education. And I think that probably at the time uh, gave me sort of an unorthodox training to go into comics just because, it wasn't an illustration degree, it wasn't graphic design, it wasn't being self taught just by reading other books. So not that there isn't other fine artists who also make comics. I'm definitely not saying that, but I think it is a bit unorthodox for that kind of training to then transfer into the comics medium.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think those are the two like real key points on the direction my art's taken. Um, and I think comics are just kind of like they're this perfect landing strip for people who love to write and people who love to draw. Other mediums do it, film, animation, static illustrations for a written book, but I feel like no other medium has those two languages meeting so perfectly in the middle of each other.
Hmm.
So for me, that's just like the end all be all for a creative platform.
Such a great description. I want to quote you on that somewhere at some point. The landing
Ah,
strip.
all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
Absolutely. I will do that. Um, so before we wrap the episode, I always want to give you the chance to say anything else that we might have missed. I also want to make sure that you have the chance to share about the book again, Constellations, May 23rd. Any other details about that, the publisher or websites or anything like that, so that folks who hear this can go then find what they would like to on the World Wide Web of information.
Yeah, totally. Are we running short on time? Because I just realized I never even ended up talking about layouts after I.
No, no, no. You are fine. You are fine.
Okay,
Sorry,
cool.
I didn't mean to cut you short there.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm so sorry. I'm
no,
such
you're
a
fine.
scatterbrained person that I started out meaning to talk about that and then just totally didn't. So, yeah, you
No
had
worries.
mentioned through email that you were into like, I guess my unorthodox layouts
Yeah,
or,
very creative.
oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thank you. I'm really pumped that you noticed that because I think with comics, we were just talking about there's the language of text and there's a language of imagery. And I think with comics, there's also that third language where the two meet in the middle. And, I think layouts have so much potential for meaning behind them. There's so much you can do to communicate with them beyond just the material it's framing. And there's a chance for hidden messages, blatant messages, symbolism, motifs, like anything, any kind of literary device like can be worked into layout. And I think, to me it feels like almost like a disservice to the medium to not to just treat layouts mathematically rather than this like wildly expressive tool that they are. Um, but it can be tough too, for sure. Like, let me be super clear. Like, no one's more critical of my work than myself, to the point where it's like a problem. But I do think, like it's a risk to work that way because there's that balance of expression versus clarity, and I don't always handle that perfectly. Uh, and it also is where that line is, where the perfect line between expression and clarity. It's different for everyone. It's a moving target, so there isn't that like just like very static line to hit for that. So yeah, I feel like it's a risk. I think it can turn some readers away, but I do think it's worth it to miss in some spots to really hit in others, and I think it's worth it to challenge the work and yourself and your reader. Um, and if I end up if that way of working ends up alienating some readers, like that's a bummer, but I think that's a worthy trade if I am making something that's exactly right for someone else. I feel like if you've made something for everyone, then you haven't made art. And I feel like that's kind of like the sacrifice you have to make art.
And I mean, I would hope that, especially since I've been reading comics since I was 7, so I'm used to like the traditional panel layout. So when I see
Mhm.
something that breaks those conventions, it automatically catches my interest. So
Awesome.
definitely something in the book to appreciate as
Awesome.
well.
That's
Yeah,
great to hear, man. I think,
yeah,
yeah, it does. It asks more. I think it can ask more of people, and sometimes that's uninvited. But sometimes it like hits people just the right way. So I'm glad that you were one of the folks who got into it.
definitely, definitely. The book it's a beautiful piece of art. It's a wonderful story, worth sharing and worth celebrating. So, anything else before we mention where folks can go to check out anything, author website, which I think is how I connected with you,
Mhm.
um, as well as places to find the book.
That would be fantastic. So social media can make me pretty feel pretty bad at times. So I am on there in fits and starts. But for comic stuff, for fine art stuff, you can find me at Katie Crime Spree. It's all one word. And I am also coming out the other end, or approaching coming out the other end of a tattoo apprenticeship. And that account is at Katie_Glash_tattoo. Not much up on that account yet, but I have a lot of stuff that I need to get posting. So those two links. And then I guess my gallery stuff is represented by, not represented, but I have my most recent gallery collections at a Philly gallery called Paradigm. And they have all of those available to view on their website. So, and I can send you the link and after we're done chatting if you need that.
Please do, please do. I think Brian Level is one of the other artists that I know. He does work for DC and other places, and he's a tattoo artist as
Oh yeah,
well. So that yeah, so very cool, very
that's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah. Um, so absolutely places to connect, and the book is coming very, very soon. Hopefully, it's the first of many stories that you'll be sharing. And
I hope so. Thank you very much, Jason. Yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry. The places to buy. I always, of course, encourage people to go to their local shop, comic shop, bookshop. They
mhm,
can help you
mhm.
order it, or bookshop.org online is great because it's kind of like the convenience of ordering from a UI like Amazon, but it sends the order to independent bookstores, as I'm sure you've heard of. But I definitely like encourage people to go there first. But if it just for whatever reason that's not doable, it's up everywhere. Target, all the big box stores. So
Thank you so much for spending some time with me. and meeting with me. Anything before we wrap the episode that you'd like to share for readers to keep in mind, or anything like that as final words?
Hmm. Shoot, I don't think I have anything.
Hey, it's all good. It is all good. I always like to provide the opportunity just to make sure that you don't get to the end of the interview and go, "Oh, I wish I had said that." Um, so
No,
thank you
I'm
so
just
much.
glad I got in talking about layouts after I specifically said I was going to.
Oh
So
yes, yeah, yeah.
that was the one thing to scratch off the list.
Yeah, and again, it's noteworthy, and I'm glad that you mentioned that again because definitely something that I took away from the book, and I believe other people will as well. So thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jason.
Kate
Super,
Glasheen.
super nice talking to you. Thank you very much for having me. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, my pleasure, absolutely, and hope to have you on again at some point to talk about future works as well.
It's a date. Let's do it.
Sounds great.
All right. Bye,
Thank you so
Jason. Have a good
much.
night.
You too. Thanks.